Hey, it's Craig. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Canadian History X early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Hey everyone, Craig Baird here. Before I begin today's story, I want to take a moment and ask that you check me out on Patreon at www.patreon.com/CanadaEHX. There are several tiers with great benefits, from ad-free content to t-shirts and other cool stuff. And if you're a fan of Canadian History X, make sure you check out my other shows, From John to Justin and Canada, A Yearly Journey. And don't forget, you can also donate directly to the show at www.canadaehx.com. It helps keep this show going. Alright, on with the show. Along the river, a large group of people gather. Swans swim in the sparkling water of the tree-lined river. A buzz moves through the crowd as they wait in eager anticipation. Then, they hear it. The doors open, and the crowd enters a new world of wonder. Each person takes their seat, and as they wait, they can almost hear the echoes of voices from the past. They are familiar voices to many. Alec Guinness, Christopher Plummer, Maggie Smith. Each of those voices brought to life the words of Shakespeare, George Bernard Shaw, and even Harvey Fierstein. But it is so much more than just a performing space. It is a place for working creatives, from the stage design, the costumes, the other lesser-known actors. It's a place where the veil is thin between what's real and what's imagined. The audience doesn't know what they'll get, but they know it's something special, and have been traveling from around the world for over 70 years, as we will be. I'm Craig Baird, this is Canadian History X, and today we're treading the boards at the Stratford Festival. Back in 1828, a small community began to spring up in southern Ontario. As more settlers arrived, this growing centre needed a proper name. Thomas Mercer Jones was an administrator in Upper Canada, and he took inspiration from his English roots and called the community Stratford, in honour of Stratford-upon-Avon, the birthplace and burial spot of William Shakespeare. The first hotel was opened that same year, appropriately named the Shakespeare Hotel, where a portrait of the playwright, given to the settlers by Jones, was hung on the wall. From the very beginning, Shakespeare was a part of Stratford. By 1858, the community had enough of a population to incorporate into a village, and as the Grand Trunk and Buffalo Lake Huron Railways came through in 1856, the future was looking bright. In 1859, Stratford became a town, attracting many new visitors and residents, including a 17-year-old telegraph operator named Thomas Edison, who lived there briefly in 1864. In 1885, with a population of 9,000 people, it was incorporated into a city. The Grand Trunk Railway eventually became the city's largest employer thanks to a railway repair yard that opened in 1908. At one point, 40% of the working population was employed by the company. As the 1920s dawned, the community had become a furniture manufacturing center, with nearly 15% of all the furniture made in Canada coming out of Stratford. But things can change quickly, and after 2 world wars and the Great Depression, Stratford wasn't the same. The Second World War had accelerated technological development, and the end of the railway's dominance gave way to the automobile. And this was bad news for Stratford. In 1951, the Canadian National Railways announced they were phasing out the locomotive shops in Stratford, with an eventual closing date of 1958. The furniture industry, once a vibrant part of the community, had not recovered from the decline that began during the Great Depression. If Stratford wanted to stay a thriving centre in southern Ontario, it needed to evolve. And that's when a young man came up with an idea inspired by the city's name, and it would change everything. In the early 1930s, Tom Patterson was a young student in Stratford. He had an idea that his hometown should follow the lead of the original Stratford and create a festival centered on the plays of William Shakespeare. He brought up the idea to his friends in Shakespearean gardens next to the school, but it went nowhere. He was a kid after all. But it was an excellent idea, lightning in a bottle as they say, but the time just wasn't right. Patterson had to be patient. He carried his idea through the Second World War. He carried it with him while attending Trinity College and when he began writing for the magazine Civic Administration. He bided his time until he attended a conference in late 1951. By that year, Stratford City Council and Chamber of Commerce were both looking for new ways to revitalize the town, and for inspiration, Mayor David Simpson attended a waterworks conference in Winnipeg in 1951. There, a man with $1 million idea ran into him. It was like peanut butter meeting jam. The two men talked, and Patterson brought up the Shakespearean Festival idea he had held close for 2 decades, and Simpson absolutely loved it and encouraged Patterson to bring it to Stratford City Council in January 1952. His proposal was to go to New York City and try to encourage Sir Lawrence Olivier to join his efforts in bringing the Baird to southern Ontario, and this was no easy task. Olivier was a giant of the stage during the mid-part of the 20th century. Considered the greatest Shakespearean actor of his time, he went on to win 2 BAFTAs, 5 Emmys, 3 Golden Globes, and 2 Academy Awards. There was no bigger Shakespearean actor in the world to approach with the festival idea. Stratford City Council loved his proposal and gave Patterson $125 for his journey, $25 more than what he asked. Meanwhile, a reporter covering the council meeting also loved the idea, and on January 22, 1952, the Stratford Beacon Herald ran the headline, "Council told of idea to make Stratford world-famous Shakespearean Centre." Unfortunately, in New York, Patterson had no luck in meeting Sir Lawrence Olivier, but he met with the Carnegie and Rockefeller Foundations. They didn't give him money, but they told him he had an excellent idea, and that was enough to give Patterson the confidence to pursue his dream. With news of a Stratford Shakespearean Festival now spreading across the country, the City Council abandoned all other ideas on the table. They were fully committed to Patterson, who at the same time met with CBC producer Mavor Moore. Mavor spoke to his mother Dora, who was the director of the New Play Society. She loved the idea of a Shakespearean festival, and Patterson received the first firm commitment from someone in the industry. She told him to contact Tyrone Guthrie, a close friend of hers who happened to be one of the leading Shakespearean directors in the English-speaking world at the time. Patterson called Guthrie at his home in Ireland. When Guthrie picked up and heard Patterson say he was calling from Toronto, he hung up, thinking it was a prank call. Patterson called again. This time, Guthrie gave him a chance and said, "I'm certainly interested, especially if it offers a fresh advance in producing Shakespeare. How about money?" Patterson could only offer $500, and Guthrie accepted the offer, and the small festival now had a big name associated with it. For the next few weeks, they exchanged letters and planned everything out. In July 1952, Guthrie arrived in Stratford, expecting, in his words, to find a committee made up of elderly ladies with businessmen, but was surprised to find everyone was younger than he was. Patterson and the committee told him that they knew nothing about theatre, nor its operations, and had no facility to produce a festival. This meant very little restraints to Guthrie's artistic vision, which made it impossible to pass on. He had spent 20 years producing large and extravagant Shakespeare productions for radio, at Cambridge and the Westminster Theatre. The chance to create a festival from the ground up through a grassroots movement was a challenge he had to take. Guthrie had been pushing the idea of producing Shakespeare's plays on the same type of stage Shakespeare would have used. Now he had the chance because the committee had also given him a free hand to design the theatre. Guthrie wrote years later in his book, Renown at Stratford, "Most of us similarly placed abandon our great ideas, write off as daydreams and settle for something less exciting and more practical. Not so Mr. Patterson. His perseverance was indomitable." While aspects of the festival could be amateur, Guthrie insisted that everyone involved in the production be experienced. Guthrie used his connections in England to bring in some of the best production staff and designers in the world of theatre to the small town of Stratford. And with the theatre staff in place, it was now time to bring in an actor to give the first production real legitimacy. Enter stage left, Obi-Wan Kenobi. When people think of Alec Guinness, they think of probably 2 things. His Oscar-winning role as Colonel Nicholson on the bridge on the River Kwai from 1957, and his Oscar-nominated role as Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars from 1977. But for years, he had been famous in theatre circles as one of England's best actors alongside Laurence Olivier, with whom he occasionally acted. Because of his theatre work, he became close friends with Tyrone Guthrie, who called in 1952 to ask a favour. He wanted Guinness to act in a small production in a small town in Ontario. He had received several offers to act in Shakespearean productions that theatre season, including one from the Royal Shakespeare Society in England, but like Guthrie, the grassroots feel of the Stratford venture appealed to Guinness, and he accepted the offer, and even turned down a contract in an unnamed movie. When word got out that Guinness had turned down a movie to act at Stratford, a New York ticket broker bought up all the seats for an entire week of shows. Joining Guinness on stage would be Irene Worth, a British actress who worked with Guthrie on several Shakespeare productions. Patterson always had the goal that the festival would be, quote, demonstratively a Canadian one, carried out not merely by Canadian initiative, but with Canadian finance, but by Canadian actors. The stars may have been British, but 74 of the 80 cast members were Canadian. Guthrie chose two productions for the inaugural season of the festival, the historical drama Richard III and the comedic All's Well That Ends Well. Richard III was written between 1592 and 1594 and tells the story of the jealous and crippled Richard of Gloucester who wants to become King of England. The Machiavellian pursuit of the crowd leads him to send his young nephews to their deaths, and when he fails, Richard famously shouts, my horse, my kingdom for a horse." At that moment, Richard loses the War of the Roses. The victor in the battle, Henry Tudor, becomes Henry VII, the first of the Tudor monarchs and the founder of the Tudor dynasty. Choosing that play was controversial. The Stratford Beacon Herald called the title character unwholesome, who was a, quote, physically repulsive hypocrite, liar and murderer, without one redeeming feature. The newspaper was especially angry. It was chosen in 1953, the same year of Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, and called the decision a hideous blot on royalty. But as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. And the show must go on regardless of what newspapers had to say. So, it was time to build a venue. In November 1952, the board of directors for the Stratford Festival Foundation were elected, with Tom Patterson in the role of general manager. His main task was to raise money to build the stage and buy the tent that the actors would perform under. For the next few months, Patterson worked hard as some worried the entire festival would be cancelled due to a lack of funds. Thanks to donations from large companies in the area and from Stratford residents, the money was raised in time. And with that, a tent made in Chicago was ordered, and the local contractors built the stage. The tent wouldn't arrive until the end of June, only 2 weeks before the first performance. As a result, the first rehearsals were held in a shed on Stratford's fairgrounds. The shed was small, with a hot tin roof, and was home to dozens of sparrows. Timothy Finley persuaded the birds relieved themselves with wild abandon as they flew above us. On June 26, 1953, Skip Manley and 30 of his workers arrived to raise the tent over the two 25-meter poles made of Douglas pine. It took 60 hours to put up the tent, as nearly half the town watched. The canvas was 45 meters in diameter and rose 19 meters from stage to peak while weighing 3 tons and was tied down with 16 kilometers of rope and 3 kilometers of cable. The amphitheater was dug 7 meters into the ground and could seat 1,500 people. Guthrie chose a thrust stage built for the festival, which is not like a normal stage, where audience sit in front like they would at a movie. Instead, a thrust stage is surrounded on 3 sides by the audience, allowing actors to be more intimate and interactive in their performance. The theater was designed by Tanya Mosowich, who had worked with Guthrie many times in England. Her designs took inspiration from the Elizabethan apron stage and the ancient arenas of the Greeks and the Romans. It consisted of a protruding platform, a balcony, trapdoors, 9 acting levels, and 8 entrances. This meant no audience member would be more than 19 meters from the stage. For context, 19 meters is 1/3 the length of the ice in a hockey rink. The Stratford Festival opening was becoming news across Canada. In Macleans magazine, Alan Phillips wrote a multi-page feature on May 1, 1953, 2 months before the festival. He said, "The 19,000 residents of Stratford in southern Ontario have for years taken a somewhat cavalier attitude towards tourists. The tourists have repaid Stratford in kind. They have roared past the East End clusters of factories, glided down an avenue of tree-shaded homes, slowed down for a wide drab of Main Street. This July, things are going to be different. Stratford hotel owner Wes Litt had reservations from across North America and as far away as England, but there were some who criticized the arrogance of a small town attempting to put on a world-class festival. Rupert Kaplan, a veteran Montreal drama producer, said, "We know better than to try to pull off a thing like this in Montreal, but you don't know the pitfalls, so you go right ahead." Meanwhile, Patterson, Guthrie, Guinness, and everyone involved in the festival could not be dismayed. They knew they had something amazing. As opening night approached, 75,000 in-advance ticket sales were sold and Stratford was ready for showtime. The influx of people meant Stratford Festival organizers had to arrange homes and offer rooms to visitors. Canadian National Railway also offered to produce a special sleeper car service on its passenger trains for groups of 30 or more. The Knox Presbyterian Church and YMCA offered to prepare and serve meals, while the Canadian National Telegraph made sure it had staff around the clock in case critics needed to wire stories to newspapers across eastern North America. The Girl Guides were even enlisted to direct traffic into parking lots. July 13, 1953 was opening night. In the audience were 1,500 people, including 85 theatre critics from across Canada and the United States. It was a who's who of famous faces. There was Lady Eaton, the wife of former Eaton's president John Craig Eaton. Canada's musical knight Sir Ernest Macmillan was there, as was the president of Maclean Hunter, the publisher of Maclean's magazine, Floyd Chalmers. God Save the Queen was played, and then Alec Guinness as Richard III opened his mouth and said, "Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by this son of York." Nathan Cohen, a theatre critic for the Toronto Daily Star, was in the audience, and although was uncomfortable in the hot tent and the chair bothered him as Guinness continued the famous Shakespearean speech, he soon forgot all of that. He wrote, "That excitement, that enthusiasm, just kept mounting. We were one with the actors. It was more than involvement, it was a mingling of soul. We felt that something absolutely original and world important was going on, and we were mixed our tensions and jubilations with that of the actors." The first play was an absolute triumph. If Rotten Tomatoes had existed, that first performance would have a 100% rating. It was universally acclaimed. The curtain calls continued for 5 minutes until Guinness came out and expressed his thanks to the crowd and to the British and Canadian actors who he had shared the stage with on that special night. Detroit Times drama editor Harvey Taylor wrote, "Not even the bloody, depraved hero of King Edward III dampened the festival mood of the audience under the huge canvas tent. Alec Guinness, Irene Worth, and their spirited company of Canadian and English actors were given a long ovation, and the audience trooped out as if they'd seen a sprightly little farce." Globe and Mail drama critic Herbert Whittaker went a step further, calling it the most exciting night in the history of Canadian theatre. Even the Stratford Beacon Herald, that had criticized the play selection, stated on a front-page headline that the festival had a triumphant start, although that headline was overshadowed by a story on the increase in cheese prices. 10,000 people had attended nightly performances by the end of the week. The hope was to have at least 60% of the seats filled each night. Instead, they were at 98% capacity each performance. And it wasn't just Stratford that benefited. Kitchener, 50 kilometers away, and London, 62 kilometers away, both saw an increase in hotel occupancy during the festival run. It had been a massive success and so well received that the season was extended from 5 to 6 weeks. Alec Guinness adored his time in Stratford and told the Beacon Herald, "I think Canadians are the most kind and generous people I have ever encountered. I must say that people have been very thoughtful in their offers of hospitality, but it just hasn't stopped. One can't possibly repay the hospitality in any shape or form." He was so impressed by 2 Canadian actors, Richard Easton and Timothy Finlay, that he offered them an opportunity to study drama in England. The first season, the original budget had been $150,000, and that was exceeded by $60,000. So although the festival ended up with a $4,000 deficit, it was seen as a massive success. And whether anyone knew it or not, Stratford and the theatre scene in Canada would never be the same again. In the first 4 seasons of the festival, 400,000 visitors saw 260 performances. The 1954 festival season was one of the most successful. That year it ran for 9 weeks and included not only Shakespeare's Measure for Measure and The Taming of the Shrew, but also Sophocles' play, Oedipus Rex. Among the actors on stage that season were Douglas Campbell, Timothy Finley, Don Herron, Douglas Rain, and William Hutt. The next year, the festival debuted jazz and pop concerts, solo performances, and opera. By 1956, the festival saw the departure of Tyrone Guthrie, who moved on to new challenges. He was replaced by Michael Langham, who remained the artistic director of the festival until 1967. The festival was a growing part of Stratford's identity, and the decision was made to build a permanent structure. The new theatre was designed by Robert Fairfield, who wanted to keep the atmosphere of the original tent theatre and built a structure that looked like a giant tent. The new theatre would be 61 meters in diameter and rise to 21 meters above the stage. Through the addition of a balcony, seating was increased to 2,200 people. The Festival Theatre, as it would be known, was constructed by 150 workers from Gaffney Construction, a local Stratford company, and finished just in time for a dedication on June 30th, 1957. And what happened to the original tent, you ask? It was cut into small pieces, and those small pieces were glued to tickets and given to Stratford Festival supporters as mementos. Under the new building that first season, the festival's production included Hamlet, Twelfth Night, and the satirical plays My Fair Lady and The Turn of the Screw. From this point on, the Stratford Festival would continue to expand and become the defining theatre festival in Canada. The Stratford Festival didn't just focus on classical plays, and also gave way to the silver screen. From 1956 to 1961, and again from 1971 to 1975, the Stratford Film Festival was held alongside the Shakespeare Festival. It was one of the first film festivals in North America to present international films and was launched under the guidance of Tom Patterson, the same man who brought the Shakespeare Festival to the community. After the hiatus from 1961 to 1971, the film festival returned and ran for 5 more years. When the Festival of Festivals, now the Toronto International Film Festival, launched in 1976, it spelled the end of the one in Stratford, as a larger urban centre quickly overshadowed it. But when it comes to the stage, Stratford reigns supreme in Canada. In 2002, there were 4 venues. In 2022, the festival opened its latest venue, a 60-seat theatre called the Tom Patterson Theatre, honoring the man with the $1 million idea. Patterson had worked with the festival in various capacities until 1967, when he founded the touring company Canadian Players with actor Douglas Campbell. He was awarded the Order of Canada and the Order of Ontario, and an island in the Avon River was named for him. Sadly, he never saw this new theatre, as he died in 2005. Richard Monet, the artistic director of the festival at the time, said, "Without Tom Patterson, there would be no Stratford Festival. He was an extraordinary vision and an extraordinary time." The list of celebrated performers who have walked the stage at Stratford is immense. I could spend the next 5 minutes just listing them, but that's not fun. One person who frequented the Stratford stage from its very beginning under canvas all the way to the Festival Theatre and beyond was future Oscar winner and the greatest actor to ever portray a Klingon, Christopher Plummer. Who was his understudy, you ask? Some guy named William Shatner. Just some other performers who went on to have legendary careers include Jackie Burroughs, who played Aunt Hetty on Road to Avonlea, along with Anne of Green Gables alumni Jonathan Crombie and Megan Follows. Then there was Canadians' favorite Mountie on Due South, Paul Gross, Bonanza's Ben Cartwright, Lauren Green, and Janet Wright, who later played Emma Leroy on Corner Gas. Eric McCormick from Will and Grace projected the Bard's words, as did 2-time Oscar winner Dame Maggie Smith. The man who couldn't get enough cowbell, Christopher Walken, appeared on stage in 1968, long before he became famous. And so did the King of Kensington, Al Waxman. If there is a famous stage, television or film actor in Canada, chances are they have walked the boards of a Stratford stage at some point, and the impact of the festival has been immense. In 1951, 2 years before the festival began, Stratford had 18 restaurants, 1 motel, and 7 hotels. Within 50 years, the community had 78 restaurants, 11 motels, and 6 hotels. By the end of the century, it was estimated that the economic benefit of the festival equaled $125 million per year. Today, those who have never even been to Stratford know about the festival. It has become one of the most prestigious Shakespearean festivals in the world, and it's not only a shining gem in the Ontario creative field, but in Canada. The festival is a place where creative fields merge. In 2018, the federal government designated the Stratford Festival as a National Historic Event, and there's even a Heritage Minute about the festival.
Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by the sun of York.
Alec, dear, since this is one of his most famous speeches, I think it is incumbent upon us...
It's the 805 for Toronto.
Chamber of Commerce guy said to me, Patterson, Stratford has always been a railroad town. And I said, yeah, but I'm planning to change that.
Well, we'll have to hold the curtain until 8:10.
My conscience hath 1,000 several tongues, and every tongue brings in a several tale, and every tale condemns me for a villain. Perjury in the highest degree, foul murder in the direst degree.
When Tom Patterson brought Richard III to a leaky tent at Stratford, Ontario, they started a love affair with festivals that still goes on. The Montreal Jazz, the Toronto International Film Festival, the Yorkton, the Shaw, the innumerable faces of Festival Canada.
And to think, it all began in a leaky tent with the words, "Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by this son of York." I hope you enjoyed that episode and our look at the Stratford Festival. This show is researched, produced, and written by me, Craig Baird, with the help of Dila Velasquez. Audio production and design by Rosalind Kufor. If this is your first time listening and you like what you heard, please take a moment and give us a 5-star review to help other people find these amazing stories. And there are so many for you to sink your teeth into. If you enjoy this podcast, then please check out my other podcasts, From John to Justin, Canada, A Yearly Journey, Pucks and Cups, and Canada's Great War. We love hearing from you, so if you have a show topic you want me to cover, email me at craig@canadaehx.com, or stop by my website and social media. I'll include all of those in my show notes. Until next time, I'm Craig Baird, and this is Canadian History X.